here is that we're digitizing a logo, and that we've helped a customer with before, and showing how we would go about doing this for caps. And the rules that we follow, we've already started on, which is sew from the center out, sew from the bottom to the top, finish each area completely, even if it means additional color changes or cuts. And then for flexible material, you may have to add additional stabilizing stitches. So first thing is sew from the center out. Anything, if you draw an imaginary line down the middle of your logo, whatever is to the right of center, sew from the center to the right. Anything to the left of the center, sew from the center to the left. So we've just started that by actually doing regular text on this word filtered cigars. And you can see when we replay it, it automatically goes from left to right. So now what we want to do is we want to then take the logo and we're going also following rule 2, so from the bottom to the top. We started with this image here doing the bottom. Now we're going to go ahead and do the word buck going from left to right. So anything to the right of center we can pretty much sew naturally in order the text normally would. And again, we'll cheat, and we're going to use the word buck using an existing font, like the Arial black font that we just used. So let me see if I can't find that here. And it looks like normally this should add it on, so but we'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and go to, again, our true type fonts, go to create, and then hyper font. So, and I'll just type the word buck. And then we'll select our font again. There's Arial black. Hit OK. And make it into a column stitch and finish. And here's our word buck. And let's go ahead and see if we can't size that. Instead of knowing any numbers, notice that you can actually drag that to until it matches your artwork. And that's pretty close. In fact, the B is perfect. It looks like just the spacing is a little bit off. So what we're going to do is, let me go and reduce the size here of the space until we're a little bit closer, and let's see how well that works. So that looks like that's lining up perfectly. So we're going from left to right, sewing in the black. With larger letters too, if you have a little bit of space, this is several millimeters of width. I'm going to go ahead and do some things to the settings before we make our stitching. So I want to go into my embroidery settings, and I want to add an edge walk underlay, which will pick the edge of the satin stitches up and make them pop a little bit more. And then I want to add at least 10% stretch, which will make the stem sew a little bit wider. So those are good general settings. And then we'll otherwise just kind of leave that alone. And we'll hit apply, which sets that as the default. So the next when we do the word red, then it's going to do exactly the same setup again. So let's go and punch that out. And you can see it fills in our stitching for the word letter buck. Now what's interesting is that the deer head here that's supposed to sew on top of this is now overlapped by this the corner of the B. Let's show you some of the things we can do here. Let me zoom in and let's hide some of this some of the detail here so we can keep the screen less busy. We want to edit this so that we can kind of bring, we can lessen some of the overlap here. And what you can actually do is you can add a point here, insert a point, so that we can add some detail and then shape this cutout. Now we can actually cut out that area in the embroidery so we don't have a bulge here, which winds up being about how this was actually digitized in real life. We cut that out, and I just kind of hit enter, and now the stitches, when I hide the image, you can see now the stitches are redrawn to mirror that cutout. So now I'm going to go ahead forward with the word red, and let's do exactly the same thing. I'm going to go to lettering, let me see if the word, let's see if the fonts here, for most fonts normally, there it is, Arial black, and I'll do red. And remember the size we were at, so that really saves us some time. See how that matches up perfectly? And hit stitch it. Now we've got one little problem. And when we do lettering, the default is going from left to right. So let's watch how that goes. I'm going to go to View and redraw the design. Remember, we want to start from the center out. So the word filtered cigars is going correctly from the center. It's going towards the edge. And the word buck is going to be the same thing. So it's showing the B, then the U, D, and then the K. So, but we want the word red to go from D to the E to the R. So you can see it's RED like it normally defaults to do. So how do we change the order of the red? What I would recommend doing is within text, everything's grouped together. So we want to select this group and ungroup, so select one of the letters. And to enable you to manually resequence that, go into Editing, right-click, and use split characters. And now you can actually take the word red and sequence it, drag and drop. Now I can take the and move it on top. And now, and then D, and move that on top of the R. Okay, Darren, sorry about that. Remute. All right, guys, sorry about that. We had some background noise. It's nobody's particular fault. That's just how it goes, so we'll remute. I try to keep the mic open as need be. But you can see now we've sewn, well, let's go ahead and try and take the D and then put it on top of the E and put it on top of the D. Okay. All right. We've got a request from Garen to go over that again. So I agree with you. So the idea is that what we're seeing here is our problem was that it's sewing buck, B-U-C-K, which is fine, but we're sewing for hat, so the R-E-D, the red, automatically, any text that you type in Stitch and Sew will automatically sew from left to right. So what we want to do is change the order of just the section of the word red so that it can then sew in the opposite order. So to do that, it comes as a group, so we need to what's called ungroup that. And the way we do that is select one of the letters, click on Editing, and then right-click anywhere and choose Split Text to Characters. Now, since we did it already, it's already done. But if this is highlighted, it means it's already a group and it needs to be split up if you need to reorder it. So Split Text to Characters. Now, one thing that confuses people is nothing will appear to happen. But once you split text to characters, you've ungrouped that section. And in this case, we typed red all at once, so red is a section. And then you can now drag and drop. So that's why I can, if I want to make red go buck and then red, or I can do red buck, I can just literally drag and drop these individually. I can go to R and then put it in front of the S here. Now there are, oops, hang on a second. Let's actually start this over so we can see this. So I'll go to lettering, Arial black, it remembered. And let's just go ahead and recreate it real quick. So by default, it's going to sew left to right. But if I want to change, so it shows RED, but if I try to drag and drop that, I'm going to go ahead and just hide everything and put the D before the K, nothing happens. So I need to change, ungroup that. So select one of the R's, go into Editing, and then right-click. And then go into Split Text to Characters. And now we can individually resequence the letters. And I want to go ahead and take the D, drag it and put it on top of the, drag it and get out of Editing first. Take the D, drag it and put it on top of the K, and you'll see it'll scoop that in front of the K. So now it's going to go buck and then D. Now we want, and then we'll go R and then E. So let's go and fix the, as you can see in our little block list, I want to take my E and then drag that and put it on top of the D. And you can see now it goes buck, then D-E-R. So let's sew that out and see what happens. If I go to View and then Redraw Design, you can see that everything to the right of my center goes from left to right, as it should be for tabs. but now everything on the left side, to the left of center, is now going from left to the outside. But if you'll notice very carefully, well, let's take care of our spacing. So I know this may drive some of you all crazy, is that this looks like it's touching. Notice as long as you're not in digitizing editor or lettering mode, you can pick up letters, drag them around. And actually, I highly recommend if you've got stitching and spacing like this, you want to actually, the way stitching is running like this, stack stitching, you want to increase your this even further, because these letters, this letter is going to be pushing outwards towards the D. So we want to increase that gap even more. Even though these are touching here, we don't have that situation where a stem is sewing horizontally and it's pushing against. So we'll actually have little gaps here the way we want it to, according to the art. But here, we do want to open up that gap a little bit. But more importantly, notice that when we sew, watch the words red again. Look at the individual letters in the words red. So let me hurry on through the rest of this. And I'm going to slow it down through the word red. Look at where the E finishes, what side the E finishes on. It's finishing on the right side. Look at the R. It went on over to the left, and it's finishing to the right. So even though we resequence the letters correctly, each letter individually is going to start from the left and go to the right. Let's make this even better and make the letters sew from right to left. So we start on the right side with the D, and then end up close to the E, and then the E starts on its right side, moves closer to the R. So the final thing that we'll do is go into editing, and we're going to select each letter, and you can see that the starting point for the D is actually right here on the left, like you normally would put it. So the rightward-facing arrowhead is the start point, and the opposite-facing arrowhead that's pointing to the left is your ending point. So I want to swap their positions and hit Enter. And then I'm going to do the same thing here, is I'm going to pick this up, and we're just basically almost going to swap their positions. Just pick up your starting and ending points. What that does is it causes the program to individually break up the letter into each of its sections and redo each of its sections so that it truly starts on the opposite end that it was starting out in, and goes, and we're making it so from right to left. Now let's go and redraw this, and let's see what that looks like. And we'll pause here next to answer questions again. So I'm going to go to Design, and go to View, and then Redraw Design. And notice how the letters, again, on Filtered Cigars and Buck go truly sew from left to right. You have the B is ending on the right side. The U started on the left. So we're going from left to right. And now the D is winding up on the left side. The E will also finish its last stitch on the left side. The R started on the right side. So that's true center out lettering. You're having fewer cuts. That's going to sweep better, and that's going to sew out really nicely. So it looks like we've got a question here. So Karen, okay, Garen, you've already seen that. I'm going to actually go ahead and pause to see if anybody has any questions here. I'm going to unmute and see if we don't have too much noise. Anybody there that has any questions on what we've done so far? Okay, Garen's got a great question. How precise do you have to be with the placement of the start and end points? And I'll tell you, I'll be completely honest with you. When I place these points, what I would recommend doing is let's get out a realistic view and let's see what it did. As a digitizer, I would recommend being as precise as possible. Zoom to about 500 to 600%, and it looks accurate to you at that magnification. It's going to be accurate when it actually sews. But there's another part to this. Let's look at what we placed with red, because there's something I'm not happy about that I'll be honest with you. And let me see if we can't fix that. So let's look at, I'm going to pause that right here. You can see where the D winds up at the lower left, which is perfect. But then it does a little diagonal jump to the E, which means that you're going to, if you leave that in place and tell your machine not to cut, which is actually better, you're going to have a stitch that's running diagonally. Now, I'm a perfectionist. I like to run it across as flat as an angle as possible, and it sticks out less. So I'm going to go ahead and try and fix this, and let's see what happens when we do. If I go to Editing, you can see my end exit point here is as perfect as I can get it. And when I mean as perfect, at 400%, 600%, if it looks right, then then you're good. I don't think you need to go to 1,000%, 2,000% for accuracy. Now let's go to the E, and let's look at our editing, and let's find where that entry and exit points are. So I can see the exit point here, and you can see the entry points right here. One thing you may see from time to time with the CompuCon system is that the jump isn't really clean. So even if I move it here and hit enter, it's not really moving exactly where I want it to be. So one quick workaround you can do is find that next stitch, go into stitch editing, and find that stitch and just highlight it, go into stitch editing, and use your left and right arrow keys to find exactly that stitch. So I'm seeing from hitting the left and right arrow keys. And you can actually just move that once you can pick it up and control that if you need to be that precise with your entry and exit points. So here, a really good question. I would say look at your entry and exit points under regular view, which is not your 3D view, and then also go to your 3D view or realistic view and look at it there. Now, if there's a cut, in this case there is, because you can see between the between the D and the E there's a cut symbol. If you don't want to cut, let's go ahead and remove that cut, and that winds up being a little jump. But then we can go ahead and then move that stitch further down so that we can, like we did before, so that we don't have that. So we have that straight across jump, which is going to be much more ideal, because it won't be so visible. It looks so tiny compared to that diagonal. So a couple lessons there is you want a clean jump going across if you want to leave, if you don't want to trim, and then you also want to make sure that if you are going to adjust your entry and exit points, you're zooming in at least 300, 400%, so that, and if it looks precise here, it's going to be precise enough for your for when it actually shows that in real life. So really, really good question there, Darren. I appreciate that one. The floor's still open for questions, and it looks like we don't have any background noise, so I'm going to leave the mic open if anybody has any questions. Okay, while we're waiting for questions, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the rest of the logo here. I'm going to view and unhide the image, and we can see we're almost done with the logo technically. The only thing left is the part that's not text. And of course, for those of you who don't digitize, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, that's more easily said than done, and you're correct. So I'll go over a little bit of digitizing, and I'll tell you right now, with hats, what I find is that you don't have to worry about logos that don't have a lot of left and right travel. If we're doing this deer head, there's not a lot of travel left or right. The lettering is doing that, so we don't have to worry too much about center out. What I would do is sew the head going from the bottom to the top, and then go ahead and immediately fill in with your color. And since there's not a lot of big areas, you just basically got a main reddish brown fill, and then you're going back with some little detail that doesn't put a lot of pressure, secondary pressure on that logo. Then you can probably just do your underlying color first, then go back over it with your detail color without having to worry about left and right. So since we're actually, it's almost the centered part of the logo. So to do a quick digitizing of that, let's check first of all our grid tool. So I want to go and do show and hide my grid, and I want to look at the widest areas and see if they're too wide for a satin stitch. Well, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. This is 13 millimeters wide, or if you want to do it faster, use the little tape measure tool, drag across. You'll see the same thing at the bottom. You can see that the offset X, which is my width, or how big that is in width, is 0.55 inches. And basically, you don't want any satin stitches over about 0.4 inches. Your ultimate limit's a ½ inch, but you don't want to make any satin stitches that wide. That tells me that this needs to be a fill stitch, at least the body of the neck of the deer, which you may, if you know a little bit about stitch basics, you probably were already thinking that. So the first thing I'm going to do is break this up kind of mentally into sections. The neck of the deer, everything underneath the snout and the head. I'm just going to make this one blob, and then I'm going to then take the rest of the detail of the deer and then make them as satin blobs that put on top. And then you'll see that this starts to get a little bit interesting in 3D, taking advantage of the 3D qualities of embroidery. So in digitizing, you can draw your fill stitches with the freeform tool and just kind of draw around it. And for those of you, this is not a basic digitizing lesson, but feel free to follow up on my other webinars on how this works. But one of the things we'll teach a little bit later is a topic on how to take a shape of one color and then make it into multiple sections so that it really pops out in 3D. So I'm just going to I'm making that shape, and I'm going to take the head and then put that on top and then do the ears and the antlers. I won't bother with the whole logo, obviously, as we're approaching the end of our hour, but it'll give you a good idea of how to create it. So I'm going to go into stitch it or start the digitizing process. It's going to tell me what to do. It's asking me to enter the angle. Usually about a 45-degree angle is one of the many ways you can set the angle. I want to go ahead and make the color match what's underneath. So notice that I went to my color swatch, and then it brings up a color selector, and I just click on top of the artwork. It gives me a stitch color that's the same. And then after I've set my angle, it's asking for the entry point. I want it to start somewhere in the middle. And what this will do is it'll cause the digitizing system to create some stitching in the middle before we even fill that in. And then also, I want to go into my embroidery settings, make sure I'm set correctly. I noticed this is set for a different job. Play with any numbers that you want to do. I'm going to set my density to about 4, my underlay to about 20. That's 4/10 of a millimeter, and then 2 millimeters for your spacing between your rows. And do a fill underlay. And again, we'll go over this a little bit more in more detail later. And that looks pretty good. And apply, that'll set that as the default, so I don't have to mess with that later. And then I'll finally put my exit point in, and automatically fills that in. So here's my shape, there's my fill stitch. And then what I'm going to do to make this pop out in 3D is I want to now go ahead and trace the head. And I'm going to do it in a fill stitch, or in a column stitch. And hopefully I'm not going to violate my half-inch wide rule, because we are just doing kind of a skull, and then we'll do his ears here in just a little bit. And the only reason I know it's a him is because he's got those little antlers up top. So, and you can see as you draw a shape, you can, in the Stitch and Sew program, you can adjust that shape live while you're working on it. And then we'll just kind of fill in the detail later, next in white. But just kind of give you all an overall gist of how that works. And I ended up here, so I'm going to start here. So I'm going to hit stitch it. It's going to ask me for my entry point. I'm going to start here. And then maybe I want to go from right to left with ears, so I'm going to end over here. I do want an edge walk underlay. Okay, so this is actually, I'm going to set the defaults for the satin stitch here too. 4.0 is a standard density. Actually, more of a fill and an edge walk. Okay, so now I've got my satin stitch. And if we hide the image and we zoom out here to about a realistic view, you can see we've got the neck and then the head starting to come out in 3D. So using a flat fill stitch and then putting satin stitches on top, you can actually start seeing the detail come out, and the program remains in column stitch mode. And it looks like I really want to make this come out to the edge here. And then keep on going. And then we'll finish up this here, and we'll go ahead and pause for questions. So I don't want to go too long and just kind of go off on the side without checking in with you all to see if anybody has questions, or if we're looking for a different topic a little bit later. So, and remember, see how we're doing this is I'm starting actually I want to finish this shape closest to where I'm going, which is the ear over here, so I want to finish over here. And then we want to pick up our next shape where we left off from the last shape. And when you're doing this in digitizing, it's called pathing. The machine seems to naturally wind up where the next section is going to go. So I'm going to start here, but I'm going to end back here. So it's going to walk on up to the end and then fill back. And that way I'm in an ideal place to then do the antlers. So let me hide the image here. You can see it's really starting to look like a deer head coming out at you in 3D. I'm going to save this just because I've done a little work on it. And make sure you save in what's called CHE format. That lets you make the kind of changes that I've been able to do. So I'll call this Redbook. And that's basically how we're doing the doing this logo. So we're following center out, going from bottom to top, and you finish each area completely. In this case, once we start our deer, we don't want to go anywhere else before we finish all the other detail on it. But in this case, this winds up being the last thing. All right, so going ahead and I'm going to go ahead